Emily, I think that's Emily that's there for PAC, so we are going to go. And I will begin the meeting by reading the introduction. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel. And this meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely. The town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19, is currently following the guidance from Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent the spread, and all town facilities are currently closed. Is that true? They're still currently closed to the public or open by invitation only or appointment only?
By appointment only, yes.
Okay. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's webpage, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Please note, during the Finance Committee meeting, there will be opportunities for public comment. The link to the Zoom meeting can be found in the meeting agenda, which is posted on the Lunenburg website. If there are any votes taken tonight, they will be taken by roll call. And with that, the one, just a quick announcement that I just wanted to clarify, especially for newer members, that when you are emailing other members of the board or a member of the town administration, please be sure not to share it with everybody so it doesn't turn into a problem with the open meeting law. Which I was happy to see that there wasn't an engagement, which is a good thing. So thank you for that. And with that, I will open it up to, actually, before moving it on to public comment, the one thing I wanted to ask Heather, and this is really to you at this point, I got an email from Elaine with the public notice for the public hearing. What is the possibility, chances, likelihood that we would potentially be able to be in town hall by the end of March to have the public hearing there instead of on Zoom?
We've been following the state guidelines. So right now, I mean, there were new announcements, but I believe the gatherings limit is still the same.
Okay. I wasn't sure because it looked like the Celtics were going to be able to. The end of March.
Well,
so.
We do a rapid test as you come in, yeah.
I thought the gathering limits was 100 indoors.
It's going up.
Yeah. And if we're having caucus at the school.
Well, I guess before making any kind of a determination, the other thing I would want to do is check with each of the members of the Finance Committee to determine your comfort level in participating in a public hearing in public. I think the only thing that I don't know about would be whether, since I don't know what the warrant articles are, whether there would be anybody who would be speaking to a warrant article who would not be comfortable coming to town hall.
Terry, I would suggest that we make this an agenda item for next week.
When does the public hearing notice have to be posted?
Goes in next Friday.
All right, so we could do that on Thursday. Well, it would have to be.
Meaning I think it's advertised next Friday.
Oh.
Well, we could advertise it and then amend it if we decided to have it in public and then just do but I also, yeah, we can discuss it further. In the meantime, go ahead and post it the way it needs to be posted. That's fine. And then with that, do we have any public comment from anybody on the committee?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Peter.
For those of you who are not following along or not on the board, Terry's comment regarding email in public meeting was in reference to an email that I sent last night pertaining to Heather Soroka's request a few weeks ago now regarding some background information on employee salaries and history and whatnot. And I sent a letter, which was, I apologize to everybody. I sent it reply all. It was intended to go to Heather Lemieux, not Heather Soroka, and it went reply all to everybody. So a great deal of ambiguity. But for the record, I do want to read this so that people understand where I'm coming from, and then I want to make a comment as to why I'm asking these questions. So this is in relation to the request that Heather Soroka made several weeks ago pertaining to background information on employee compensation by step and by department. So my email to Heather, last name not included, is there any progress on this request? I think given the reductions on health insurance and the resulting shell game effect on the school department budget in particular, this is increasingly important. When can we expect an update? My view is we need a clear understanding of the fully burdened apples to apples expenses for all town employees by department with historical context and surrounding and like community comparisons. I'm happy to discuss at your convenience. Now, my reason for sending this email is because I attended the school committee meeting last night. And if you recall, 2 weeks ago when the town manager made her budget presentation, I expressed some concern that the way, and we've always done it this way, but we carry a fully burdened budget in the school department, which includes health insurance, which includes building maintenance, which includes all kinds of other stuff that is not included in the individual budgets of the departments in town, because we carry things like insurance and DPW as separate departments and separate lines. The effect that has, though, when people go to town meeting or read the budget, is you can look at the increases on a year-to-year basis with a 5-year look back and say, okay, the budget increased by this much, this much, this much, and do a right down the column comparison of all of the departments. And the problem is that when you don't have fully burdened budgets on a by department basis, you're not doing an apples to apples comparison. And so the effect that had this year on the budget that has been proposed is that we are going to reserve some money for a stabilization account as proposed for health insurance. And we are budgeting all of the other departments except the school department as we normally would have. The school department initially was set to make a request of about 3.2%, I believe, 3.2 and change. As a result of their savings in health insurance this year, they're able to make their budget work within the historical and target budget of 2.5% that the town manager outlined very early in the process. They're essentially making their budget this year on health insurance savings, amongst a couple of other things. And the conversation that ensued at last night's school committee meeting was that although they are getting the new positions that they think they need based on their needs budget, they're actually going through the process of looking at what of those positions might need to be cut next year when they put health insurance back in at a full cost. So they are having to go through a process of actually determining, are we going to put this position in place and might have to deal with a cut, or would it be better to have a shorter term impact position that we think we might lose in a year? And I don't think that any other department has been put in that position. So in my view, and I've only been on the committee now less than 2 years, in my view, we made great progress last year with the dashboard approach to the budget as we went through the budget process. What I think we need this year is a clear understanding of what our people costs are as it relates to every department, fully burdened meaning health insurance and other carrying costs, and with a historical look back for all those costs. And we need a way of depicting that to the public as we present the budget. Because right now, it really isn't clear how much we're spending on a per department basis from year to year. It just is not clear. And it's misleading in terms of the fluctuations and the increases that we're adding to those or subtracting to those departments on a year-to-year basis. So suffice to say, I'm concerned about this. I'm a little bit frustrated by it, and I hope that we can find a way to better depict what's going on here and visualize it. That was my first comment. I have one more comment. My other comment is I want to wish Dave Passios a happy birthday. I understand that he's 132 years old. And
So he must have got his shot already then. Okay.
But
Thanks,
happy
Peter.
birthday, Mr. Passios.
Yeah,
Thank
happy
you.
birthday. Heather Lemieux, you had your hand up?
Yes, so I'd like to respond to that. And I responded last night when I got the email that I had reported when that was brought up at a meeting, that obviously I was working on the budget, the presentation for the preliminary presentation, and it wouldn't occur until after that. But it would be before the school committee meeting. So I am working on that data. In regards to the comment that it's a shell game, I think that is completely inaccurate. The budget included a baseline of a 2.5% increase. And I had the conversation with the superintendent and the school business manager before I presented the budget that I was going to be proposing a health insurance stabilization account, that this would defray that gap that we would potentially see next year because we wouldn't be getting a premium holiday. So it would address that for both the school and the town, those savings that we're going to see. So that funding, and I watched the school committee presentation last night, and I called the superintendent, or emailed both the superintendent and business manager, and talked to the business manager today. We have a meeting set up for Monday that I think they're don't need to prepare the budget the way they're doing because of this health insurance stabilization account that would defray those costs.
Okay.
Secondly, the school budget is not fully burdened budget. It does not include the school retiree costs, which is in the town health insurance account number line. It does not include general insurance or workers' comp insurance or Worcester County retirement insurance, all portions of which relate to school personnel and school-related cost. And the finance director can probably describe any other costs associated with the school that aren't in the school budget.
I
I'm sure-
understand that. My point is that health insurance is probably and I understand that the retirement associated costs. The biggest one here, and my biggest concern, is health insurance. And yes, there are other burden costs, which, by the way, I think we should include just for transparency's sake. But this is not an apples to apples comparison. As a town meeting attendee walks into town meeting and they look at the warrant and they look at the budget, the increases from the school department versus the increases for every other department are not including the same things.
Okay, actually, I'd like to bring the public comment back to focus here. Obviously, the town manager is working on the information from the town side. The school superintendent is working on the information from the school side. And we'll be looking forward to having a more fulsome discussion when we have all the information in front of us. One portion of that, and actually before moving on, I should ask if there's anybody else that has a public comment to make at this time before I go to Parker. Seeing no other public comment, then Chris or Peter, which of you has the presentation up for Parker? OPEB?
I can open it. I've got it.
Awesome. Parker, then it's over to you. We'll turn the discussion over. We do have some new members of the committee who haven't been through a presentation of this sort, so I just wanted to let you know that as well. So
This is the one that the first screen is Odyssey Advisors, Town of
Yeah, do
Lunenburg.
you want me to share my screen or how are we doing
well,
this?
if you'd like to control your own screen, you could do that. Otherwise, Peter
Yeah, that
can-
would obviously be easier, but
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
yeah, if you let me do that, I'll,
you can do that.
all right, I'll go over here and hopefully you guys can see my screen. It says Odyssey Advisors, Town of Lunenburg, February 25th.
It does.
All right. Well, thank you for having me out here today. Francis from our team is also here today, worked on your project, and feel free at any point in time to jump in and ask questions. You don't have to wait to the end. There's no big surprise ending. You're not going to spoil it, I promise. So, any questions along the way, just feel free to ask. So with that said, give you the quick 30-second view of our firm. We've been doing this stuff since 1998. I've been doing it longer because I'm another one of those 132-year-olds. With that said, we do this kind of stuff for 500 plus municipalities. We have offices in Connecticut and Nevada. I was in our Nevada office a couple of days ago. I was up in Idaho before that, so I spent a lot of time on the road because we're in 37 states, Europe, Australia, South America. So I spent a lot of time on Delta. With that said, so basically what happened? How did we get here? So your liability at the end of fiscal 19, we have a couple different things here with the total Opeb liability, which is the liability for all of the Opeb benefits, which is basically retiree healthcare, dental, life insurance. It's really all healthcare. That's where all the money is. So the total Opeb liability is that. The fiduciary net position, we used to call that assets, but I guess accountants thought that was too confusing. So we now call it fiduciary net position. And then the net Opeb liability used to be called the unfunded liability. Now it's just the total Opeb minus the fiduciary net position. So you're worried about a $52 million liability, and then it went to $56 million over the period, over the year. And you go, well, what happened? Well, part of that is your liability is going to go up by about $2.3 and $2.4 million a year just by the passage of time, because you're currently in a position where people are still earning benefits, which is about $1.5 million, $1.6 million a year. On top of that, you have interest on the existing liabilities. You got a $52 million liability. That's about $1.7 million of interest on that. And then we take into account any benefit payments that were made to reduce the liability. So your liability is going to go up a little bit all by itself. I saw that somebody's going to talk about debt servicing and debt structuring after me. I would tell you that Francis and I were talking about this earlier today. Your liability is heavily impacted by the municipal bond rate, which as of June 30th of 2019, the average 20-year municipal bond rate for high-grade debt was 2.66% on the index. Earlier this week, it was at 1.1. Yesterday, it got all the way up to 1.21, so it's coming back. If you're looking to borrow money, that's phenomenal. However, if your fiscal year were to end today, we're to do another valuation, forgetting about the $2.25 or so million increase I would expect to have, the interest rate alone would add about another $15 million of liability just because of the reduction in the interest rate. Now, key thing, it doesn't change any of the costs of your plan. The healthcare premiums are exactly what they were the day before. Nothing changed. But assumptions are what we have to use to value the liability. And GASB states the municipal bond rate is what we have to use. We get to use a little bit on your assets, but given the fact that you only have $375,000 of assets, we don't get to use a lot of that interest rate. So we're pretty close to the municipal bond rate. So I just tell you that if you don't see interest rates go up in the next 4 months, your GASB liability will jump significantly at the end of fiscal 21. So then the other elements here. So the service cost we talked about went from $1.6 million to $1.8 million. Again, your interest rate went from 3.25% down to 3%. Part of that's why. That drives up your financial statement expense. Expense stuff in the municipal context is, I won't say silly, but it doesn't mean the same thing as it does in the private sector because you guys are not running a P&L. We're not going, hey, listen to us, our profits went through the roof this year. We're giving out big bonuses. That's not how the municipal sector works. So it's a technical thing, but it's not anything I would spend a lot of time on. I think the liability is the more important focus. And again, it went up slightly, but it didn't go up by more than expected. It was just interest rate went down. So we talked about what are the key assumptions? Francis and I and the rest of the team, we calculate all these $57 million numbers. How do we come up with these things? There's a lot of assumptions that go into it. The only thing I can assure you is that that we do not know exactly what the final number is going to be, because I do not know when everybody's going to terminate employment, when they're going to retire, when they're going to die, whether or not they decide to take health insurance. Those are all assumptions we have to make, but assuredly we are wrong. So we make the best guess we can with the information we have. We utilize a lot of PARAC experience studies to reflect what they're doing, and the studies they've done in the state. But that is, there's a lot of assumptions to go into it, and I fully acknowledge that. But again, these are the best estimates we have at the time, and we continually refine those estimates. So, again, we're assuming healthcare costs go up by 4.5% a year. Some years they're going to go up by 0 or even -2 or -3. Some years they'll go up by 15. We're trying to figure out what we expect them to do over the next 40, 50, 60 years. And we're actually just implementing an updated model for this. Is long story short, it's a Society of Actuaries has done a lot of research. So we've got a new model that will change how we reflect these costs over the next 50 years. It ends up basically at the same number. It just changes what number goes in per year, but the net effect is basically the same. In terms of your healthcare costs, you guys offer comprehensive medical. You offer a $5,000 life insurance policy to your retirees. Your active single plan is about $800 a month. Your active Medicare supplement plan is a little on the low side at about $308. So you guys are doing well in that regard. Then everyone always says, okay, well, the key important is, how do I compare to everybody else in terms of my funding? I'm setting some money aside. How do I compare? Well, you guys, as we saw before, are basically less than 1% funded. You got 33% of people are less than 1% funded. So you've got plenty of company. It's hard. That's the easiest thing I can tell you. Listen, everybody says we should fund. It's an easier thing said than done, because to the earlier comment about budgets and, hey, the schools need X and the town needs Y. And then I come along and say, yeah, but could you drop $1 million into the Opeb trust each year for the next 30 years? And then you go, yeah, that's not going to happen. So I understand that, people like us, myself, Francis, the rest of the team, every year we're going to try and encourage you to put money in. But we recognize that you have many capital needs in your budget, of which Opeb is one. So we're just trying to make sure that we are not forgotten about at the table, but we understand that there are other priorities as well. Everyone always says, how do I compare? We try to come up with some, you guys, I'm sure, have who you consider your peers. We just tried to look for people geographically that are nearby that we thought would give us some kind of a sample. The key things I would tell you, and you probably won't be able to see my mouse, but your average service cost, the benefits earned per person, are $6,330. Our statewide average is about $4,200. So you guys are definitely on the higher side. But the key element here is your discount rate's only 3%, and our statewide average is $460. Higher discount rates equal lower liabilities and vice versa. So higher discount rates come from basically if you're setting more money aside and how you're investing that money. So it's not enough to say I'm going to put in $1 million a year and put it all in T-bills. You're not going to get a higher discount rate. You need to set the money aside and also invest it in a more aggressive format, in something that's probably a 60-40, 70-30 stock bond mix. So it's really the combination of those things. And it's the ongoing commitment to put in money year after year, not just, well, we threw in $1 million this year, what happens? No, it's an ongoing commitment to do it.
I have a question on this one. So
yeah.
I'm fairly familiar with Holden. I got family there. They're like twice the size of us in population. And I think the only, they have 147 employees. Is that mostly because they're a regional school?
You got it.
And what else are they doing that reduces their Opeb liability? And how does the regional school affect?
Well, here's the big element here. They're 35.37% funded. You're at 0.67. So they are setting aside a lot of money to the Opeb trust each and every year. And they're obviously funding it in a more aggressive manner. So those two things combined do it. As far as the regional schools and how that matters, the regional schools liability shows on the regional school district's financial statement. So, ultimately, those liabilities, if the school, I don't want to say goes bankrupt, the school dissolved, let's say, those liabilities would go back to the member towns. But as of right now, those liabilities do not flow through to the Holden financial statement. So that's why their liability is on a per person basis lower, but also their funded ratio is a lot higher because they're setting the money aside, and that yields a much higher discount rate, which equals a much lower liability.
And how are they getting a high discount rate? Just they have better investment strategy or?
Well, again, they're setting aside a lot of money each year. You guys are setting aside a couple $100,000 a year. They're setting aside more than that. And so the more money you set aside, I mean, that's the crux of the issue here. I can real quickly just do this on the fly here, but let me just look at something quick. This should be hopefully quick. So if I look at, their liability, they have a $12 million liability, but they got $4.5 million of assets. You guys have $350,000 of assets. So again, they've set aside a lot of money, each and every year to do this. Like for example, in the coming year, they're going to set aside about $600,000 into their Opeb trust. So, you guys will set aside $150,000. So that's really the reason why. And again,
their per covered retiree is lower. Is that just because their benefits are not as good as ours, or?
That's what I was going to get into in a second. So the per covered retiree, you guys are a little on the high side for really one key reason. You have about 15 people who are over the age of 65 who remain on an active plan. They are not in a Medicare supplement plan. Now, usually the rationale for that is they're not eligible for Medicare. And the normal reason for that is they're usually a teacher that was hired before 1986. And therefore they were not in the Medicare system. And so for an example I give people is a retiree. I did this in a webinar with the MCTA, I want to say back in November, maybe December. For just say a 65-year-old retiree who is in an active plan, their liability is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $500,000. Their liability, if they're in a Medicare supplement plan, is about $120,000. So there's about a $380,000 difference by virtue of them being in Medicare versus not being in Medicare. You apply that over 15 people, and I'm just taking one, simple example, but 15 people at about $400,000 a pop, that's $6 million of liability that you guys are taking on, that obviously, if they were in Medicare, would not be your liability. And I know we mentioned this in the report, and there's, what you guys ultimately do is up to you, your healthcare consultant, and you guys as a town and what you want to do. But we've seen several towns, I'm not going to say it's a tsunami by any means, but we've certainly seen some towns do what's called a Medicare buy-in. And what that basically means is you go to Medicare and CMS and say, hey, listen, I got 15 people who are not in Medicare. They never got the eligible credits they needed. Can we buy those credits? Can we basically write a check and buy the credits? Now, that check is not small. Fully acknowledge that. But even with paying that check, it is generally, from an economic standpoint, it's a layup. It's definitely to your benefit. But the other side of it is you're going to have the conversation about, and I've had this with more than one client, is, Mary is 82 years old. She's been on this plan for 17 years. It seems like a big imposition to have her go and change everything around right now. And I get that. And maybe Joe's in a similar situation. So those are decisions. There's more than just the finance side. I mean, obviously I look at numbers. And so I'm going to tell you the financial numbers, but there's an HR side of this as well. These are, live human beings, not numbers on a spreadsheet. So I can certainly, run numbers for you, but I think that's the kind of thing you want to talk to your healthcare consultant about and see if it's something you want to explore.
Actually, Parker, before you go on, Heather, you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to, this is the post 65 program that we participated this fall that we're going through right now. So we're doing that whole process you just talked about. And that's
Perfect.
saving us, that's what saved us 2 percentage points on our active renewal insurance this year.
I'm very glad you said that, because that's the next piece I always mention to people is it's all well and good to talk to your healthcare consultant and have them do it, but you need to make sure you're going to get credit on the active side, because that's the whole point of this, is that you're taking all these people out of the active pool and moving them into the retiree pool. And so that's going to significantly reduce your costs. So I'm glad you got credit for that.
So is that fact that we're moving them into that reflected in these numbers, or?
It is not. That was not done yet. So when we do the fiscal 21 report, it will be reflected in those numbers. And much like I said, I expected your liabilities to go up by about $2.5 million. Based on what you just described, I would expect your liabilities probably to drop by, somewhere in the neighborhood about $5 million based on that. So it'll go up by 2.5 and then back down by 5 based on what you guys have done on the retiree side.
So, and then are there other like if then else kind of scenarios that can be posed that gets the net liability down? Like, for example, I see $5,000 of life insurance.
There's no money there. Life insurance is not, the money's all health insurance. I mean, you could take the life insurance to zero. You might save a couple $100,000 on your liability. That's not where the money is. I mean, so, and let me just pull back up the right report here. Because, so if I look at your guys' report, that's not helpful. Hopefully you guys can see my screen again. I moved something. So you guys see the screen here?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can still see it.
Yeah. Okay. I moved to another screen and I said, wait, they're not going to be able to see this. So I just want to, all right. So, I mean, you guys are charging for the real money, which is the post 65. You guys are already charging 50% for the post 65 plan, the MedX 2 plan. That's where the huge majority of your liability is. You're not allowed to go beyond 50%. So there's not really any place to save on the design side. And I just want to look at one quick thing we show you guys in the report. And I know I'm going all over the place here, but just to show you what's in the report. So we call this our scoreboard page. Basically, as you can see out of your liability, your accrued liability here, which is the total Opeb liability, 22 million is for actives, 34 million is for retirees. But 14 plus this, so $43 million of this liability occurs after the age of 65. So I mean, my point is all the money is really in medical and it's all after the attainment of the age of 65. So, you know, you're already at 50% there. So you have no place to say, hey, I'm going to charge you more money. You're already charging the maximum you're allowed to charge them. A couple of years ago, you made the choice to go from the MedX 3 product to the MedX 2 product. So you got the savings you could get there. That was a big, you know, low hanging fruit. So you took advantage of that, which is great, but at least that's been done. So, I mean, from a purely, you know, liability side of the equation, you have really two places you can go. You can go back to the formulary again, the drug formulary, which is the MedX 2. You cut the formulary from going from MedX 3 to MedX 2. You could go back again to the formulary and cut what drugs are covered. And, you know, that will save you money, but of course it saves you money because you're reducing coverage. I mean, let's be honest about it. The other way is you can save, those are real dollar savings. I try and differentiate between real dollars and assumption dollars. The assumption dollars, if you start putting more money in your plan, again, if you start putting in $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year and committed to it, your liabilities would drop significantly because we would use a much higher discount rate. Now, you know, that's easier said than done because, you know, I doubt you just have a couple $100,000 sitting around that you guys are wondering what to do with each and every year. If you do, that's great. I'm available, by the way, but you can also throw it in the Opeb trust. So no, I think that's really the key thing here is you guys have already done the easy things. You know, as I tell this to clients all the time, when I'm in other states, there's a lot of things we can do, but Massachusetts, for better or worse, really limits your options. I can't change the eligibility. I can't say that I can't charge beyond 50%. I can't. So in other states, I might say you have to be 62 to get these benefits, or maybe I charge more for people with shorter service. Can't do that here. So, you know, your tools available to you are somewhat limited. So I think in terms of for what you can really do, you know, things on the active plan will help a little bit, but the real savings are on the Medicare plan. That's where all the money is. So that's really where you got to find ways to cut that Medicare premium, or that actual real cash savings, or you can save on the assumption side by changes in your discount rate.
So we can't do that because of Mass law, is that
Correct? Yeah, Mass General Law sets you're not allowed to charge retirees more than 50% of premium. And Mass General Law also states, they state at the retirement system level what the eligibility rules are. So you guys can't change those. They can change them across the state, but you can't change them community by community.
You mean like what age you can retire as an example?
Correct.
Are other states moving in that direction?
Well, most states allow each individual community to set those rules individually. So like, you know, I was a case in California, we changed it from 55 and 10 years of service to 62 and 25 years of service. We also set it up to where, you know, the longer service employee might only pay 10%, but the shorter service employee might pay 80%. So it was a tiered thing based on what we call points, age plus service. We've done things out in Michigan about using private exchanges and healthcare reimbursement accounts, and buying people out of their coverage. So there's different things you can do in other states. Those just don't happen to be available in Massachusetts.
Okay,
All
guess
right.
we can continue on. Yeah.
All right, we'll go back to, no, that's not where we want to be. We'll go back over here. So again, I mean, compared to your peers, you're fine. I think that the thing you took in terms of taking care of those retirees is going to get you guys back down to about the statewide average, or maybe even slightly below on your benefit payments per retiree. So I think in general, you're going to be in pretty good shape after that. The service cost per retiree we spoke about, your service costs about $1.8 million, which is the value of benefits earned during the year by your active employees. Per person, that's about $6,300. So as I tell people, think about it this way: Mary or Joe makes $50,000 a year working for you, but they have $6,330 of deferred compensation, which is a medical benefit paid in retirement. Now, that varies by function. Not surprisingly, public safety is always the highest because they can retire after 20 years, and which means therefore they are going to likely retire earlier, and they have a shorter working career to amortize those costs over. You know, enterprise funds, you have one person there. It just means they're probably younger. You can't really draw any conclusions out of that. The school and the town are pretty much about the same average. So again, public safety tends to usually be a little bit higher.
What's the effect of when employees move from one town to another?
Basically, if somebody leaves Lunenburg and goes to another town, that town will take their liability with them. If you hire somebody from another town, you take their liability on. So, so that's just the issue about, again, it's wherever they retire from is who the one is going to have that liability.
Yeah, they did try to have it worked out that districts, still other districts for their, but that just didn't work out.
Yeah. Section 9A.5 was most of my clients said we got notices and we threw them in the garbage can. And that was pretty much what most clients did. So yeah, that was, it just doesn't work when you don't have a funding mechanism like you do with the pension plan. So here's the projection over the next 40 years of what we expect to have happen. These numbers on the left are the raw numbers. So you're going to go from 56 million in 40 years now up to 234 million, which looks terrifying. And your funded status, your current projections will go from 0.67 to 9% over 40 years. And your cash out the door costs for benefit payments, are $1.9 million. They're going to go to $7 million over that period of time. Sounds insane. So we try and put it into present value terms. Think about it in a percentage of today's budget. Your liabilities go from 56 million to 74 million. So it's going to go up by about 25%. So it's not insignificant. But again, you can make small changes. It's 25% over 40 years. So you have an ability to make some small changes. And if you do that, that will, address the issue. And your pay-as-you-go cost, expect to go from about $1.9 million up to $2.2 million over the 40-year period. So it'll go up by about 15, 18%. So again, small changes, you can handle that. You don't have to go, the reason we try and give you projections is so you don't have to wait until all of a sudden you go, all right, we can't afford these numbers. What do we do? The idea here is to give you some forecast about what's going to happen. And this you go from $1.9 million by 2024, it's come down to $1.8 million. By 2029, it's back to the same number basically. And then it starts up a little bit, and then it comes back down a little bit. It's in a fairly stable range over the next 40 years. So if you can handle your retiree healthcare costs today, odds are you'll be able to handle them for the next 40 years. It's not becoming an increasing burden because you have a fairly mature population. We don't expect your population. You're not a town that has, 812 actives and 8 retirees. We're going to have a hockey stick in the out years with the numbers going up. Your numbers are relatively stable. With that said, questions, comments?
Yeah, one other question. Are we limited on the type of investments we can do with our, can we throw it all in GameStop and try to double it?
You still have, you still have fiduciary obligations that you have to live with under Mass General Law. You guys, as I understand it, are not subject to the list. So you aren't using that, but you guys are funding through a normal conventional policy, if you will, a normal investment policy. But I don't think saying, hey, I'm going to put all the money in Bitcoin. And yes, had you done that 5 years ago, you would look like a hero right now. And you wouldn't have to put in nearly as much money. But that said, No, I mean, so you do have to make, reasonable investments. You're usually working with an investment professional who you're going to pick on a policy of say 60-40, 70-30, and they're going to manage the money for you guys. I don't think you guys, I mean, I shouldn't say that. Maybe you guys do, but very, very few of my towns themselves are involved in the individual security selection. That's what they have the professionals handling for them. I do have a couple towns where they have some investment professionals on their board who want to, get involved in that. But as a general rule, I think most of the towns are using, again, it's a Bartholomew or Rockland, a Pritt, a PARS. Those tend to be the four main providers that everybody uses. And, and that's where pretty much everybody is. So yeah, I mean, but again, your limits are really, again, just being a good steward of the money and being a fiduciary. And remember, these are taxpayer dollars. You have to be, cautious is the right word, but remember that, these are not just, it's not play money, basically.
And what are we getting on those interest rates on average per year?
Well, let me just look at your report and I'll tell you your expected rate of return. Your long-term rate of return expected is 6.72 based on how your fund is invested. Based on your investment policy, we expect that to earn 6.72% a year. And that's based on, I'll come back down here to show you what the asset allocation is. So your asset allocation right now is about 20% large cap equities, 10% small cap, 10% developing markets, 5% emerging markets, 25% fixed income. And you guys have a relatively high proportion of alternatives. But again, that gets you about a 6.72% overall rate of return over time.
Any other questions? I know it's a lot to absorb, so.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there. I acknowledge that. And that's why we, honestly, when we do the report, I mean, the reality is when you get past basically, up through about page 3 of the report is for you guys. Everything from here on afterwards is for your auditors. So we really try and give you a lot of stuff up here in the executive summary to put things into something resembling English so a normal person can read this and understand it. And again, to talk about the 15 retirees who are over the age of 65, give you some quick summary numbers here and took at those present value numbers here I just spoke about. So we try and, again, really try and give it to you in the front of the report so you don't have to, go to page, 38 and go, hey, what's this number here? So we're trying to, as much as we can make this a user-friendly report.
Right, and we're not talking about in one particular year that we're going to have to pay $64 million in.
Correct.
That this is basically what we anticipate spending over a period of time and having available over a period of time.
Correct. Yep.
So, okay, well, if there's no other questions, then Parker, thank you very much. Francis, nice to meet you too. Thank you very much for coming ahead, and I'm sure that we'll be talking to you when we get past the fiscal year.
All right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Bye.
And then now that you're okay, so before you have a chance to recover from that, we're going to go with Dave Eisenthal and do some discussing around debt. So,
Madam Chair, would you like me to share my screen?
if that would be easier for you, then yes, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, I can put the analysis that I sent to Heather and Karen. Let's see if I can find that. Nope, sorry about that.
Nope, you're fine.
Let me share. Let me try again. Bear with me a moment. I will, there we go. Heather and Karen, town manager and the finance director, asked me to take a look at projecting the financial impact of two proposed major capital projects. A work on the TC Passios building and a major project at the Turkey Hill Elementary School. We assumed, I think both the projects are assumed to have a base cost of approximately $21 million. And we used $21 million as the principal amount for the TC Passios project because that's a relatively, that will happen in a relative short-term period, the next 1 to 3 years. For the Turkey Hill project, that is assumed not to start until the spring of 2030. And so we're working with Heather and Karen, I escalated that 21 million up to 27.4 million, which is a 4% annual increase in the projected capital cost. And then basically made conservative rate assumptions, assuming short-term borrowing beginning for the TC Passios building, as you can see here in the spring of 2022, about a little more than a year from now, and then some permanent financings in 23 and 24. If we go down to the Turkey Hill building, because that's a school project, and I'm sure many of you remember with the middle high school, that was a long process, and I would expect a similarly long process here where the initial borrowing might happen in the spring of 2030, but the final financing, might be a number of financings. The final financing might follow the MSBA audit approval, and I was assuming for this purpose in fiscal year 35, which would be when the final permanent financing would occur for the Turkey Hill project. Now, page 3 of this analysis shows, and this is, we assumed that both projects would be debt excluded, so we looked at the projected debt service for these two projects compared to outstanding excluded debt, and it looks, we were, I think that we were looking to see whether this would be compliant with the town's policies on the amount of excluded and net debt. And it appears that this approach would be compliant with the town's policies. And I go down, and the 4th page is the net debt, which is basically the town's debt less, does not include enterprise debt, and Karen can correct me on some of those definitions, but that's my understanding of the basis of the policy on net debt. And then finally, we made the comparison on the last page with total debt of the town. And so in all cases, we assume the maximum statutory term, which is 30 years from the original short-term issuance, if any, and level debt service, which is, that's been the approach that the town took on the middle high school financing. And you can see that you're starting this, you're talking about a 40-year period of financing, starting fiscal year 23 and actually going all the way out to fiscal year 63. So with that, I don't know, Madam Chair, if you want me to leave the screen up or as I maybe answer questions, your pleasure.
Terry, you're muted.
That's okay, Peter. I was calling on you anyway.
All right, good. Thank you. Thank you very much. So just a bit of commentary in terms of the cost of the Turkey Hill project. I was part of a small group, including the superintendent and the facilities director for the school department last summer. We kind of swagged together some numbers in terms of what that cost might be. Last night, there was actually a presentation on this topic at the school committee meeting. And Mr. Londa's numbers, I think, were a little bit more conservative than the swag that we had done last summer. So in my interpretation of his report last night, that $40 million number, which would have, I think you would have interpreted as today's cost minus the 50% school building, Massachusetts school building contribution as a 2030 cost, as a present day cost, which you then inflated out for 2030, may actually be the number in 2030. It may not be 47 odd million dollars, which we would then have to back down. So my point is we may find ourselves financing the latter part of the decade, $20 million in actual debt service. Again, they're crazy numbers. We really have no idea what this thing is going to cost. It's just for purposes of, throwing darts at a dartboard right now, I think, in terms of what our actual costs are going to be. What I did want to ask you about, though, is the discussion around the 30-year and level service. So I understand that the middle high school project was a 30-year financing. Our previous projects that we did, the library and the primary school, which are both, about coming off the books pretty close to now, as well as the public safety building, those are all 20-year terms, I believe. What is the difference in terms? I mean, obviously right now money's cheap, so it would make, a certain amount of sense, I would imagine, to make the term as long as possible. But what does that mean from a credit perspective?
Through the chair, certainly a more rapid amortization is seen positively by the by S&P Global Ratings, which is the current rating agency that the town has a rating with, and I think that I worked with the town on the middle high school. I think the concern was impact on the tax rate and on the taxpayer of the debt service, and that was why with this project we looked at a 30-year term. The assumptions here are much more conservative. If you were looking at financing these projects now, the rates would be far lower than what we're assuming here. I'm using, for Turkey Hill, I'm assuming 4.5%, because you're talking about financing more than 10 years from now. And we just don't know. It's a shot in the dark what the rates will be. A 30-year financing might be in the twos now or lower. But that's purely theoretical, because you're not in a position to finance at this point. And I think that the balance is always, you want to, especially where you are looking at direct taxpayer impact, what do you, and certainly with a 20-year issue, the rate will be lower and the total interest paid will be lower, but the impact over the life of the loan will be higher, and the balancing act is deciding what kind of impact you want to have versus trying to reduce economic cost and total interest paid.
I understand the economics of this. My question was specifically, should we expect a meaningful penalty to our credit rating when we go and finance $40 million over 30 years versus 20 years?
I think that they're already, well, I don't think that will make a meaningful difference in the credit rating. The town currently is rated AA+, and actually that's with, I believe that the last time the town was rated, the debt score on the indicative score was adequate. I mean, I think that the S&P sees both the amount and perhaps to a lesser extent the term as not being a positive. But I'm not sure that 20 years versus 30 years is going to make kind of meaningful difference that you're asking about in the terms of the credit rating. I mean, the town is a strong credit, but I think the one challenge that it has at the moment is or one of the, I think Mr. Elmore talked about one of the other challenges, but I think the amount of general obligation debt is another challenge. And the thing is, as we get through the next few years, that debt level will go down. So it might be less of a challenge going forward, but I'm not sure that to answer your question, I don't think that there's a meaningful difference in terms of the credit between 20 and 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
Yeah, so this shows 27.4 million of bonds for Turkey Hill.
Yes.
What was the assumption that the state would kick in?
I
What's the
think
total cost that we're assuming?
this was the net local share. This was the assumption as far as local share. And this was based on a base number of $21 million local share. But what working with Heather and Karen, I escalated that cost by 4% per year to 2030. That's where we get from 21 million to 27.4 million.
Yeah, that's not my question. My question is what is the assumption of the total cost of the project?
I only was working off the local share of the 20.
I think we're assuming, Chris, a 50% contribution from
Yes.
the state. So it would be double that number. But as I explained earlier, I think that's an inflated cost at this point.
Okay, I don't, but
Yeah, after hearing the TCP numbers, yeah. I'm not-
That's a fair point. Well, the costs that Mr. Londa is using are based on a blended average of school building projects over the last 5 years in Massachusetts. So
Okay. Chris, did you have other questions?
no.
Okay. Did anybody else have any questions? I'm surprised David's just celebrating his birthday quietly. Because I know that's one of the discussions. All right, so basically, I think one question I have is looking at the percentages starting from the current year, are those numbers correct? That we're currently at 16% of the
That's total.
the levy?
And that was, I think that's of total debt. And I got, working with Karen, I believe that's correct, but
Yeah, it just seemed a little high, so
but that includes your enterprise debt as well, not your net numbers.
I thought the number we saw in the budget presentation was 11.28.
And that would be consistent with what's on page 4.
Yeah,
Sure.
so page 4 match,
That's the net debt. You're looking at, that's fiscal 21 you're talking about, or fiscal 22?
21.
Yes, 11.27%.
All right, so the net is the number that does not include the enterprise funds.
That's correct.
is the
Okay.
policy inclusive of enterprise funds or not? I don't know. I don't believe it is.
I don't believe so.
My understanding is that the net debt service number that is the base of the policy does not include.
Right, because it's not part of the tax levy to collect on that debt. That debt is
Right.
paid through service fees, so.
Still an obligation, but yeah.
Right. Okay, well, if there's no other questions at this time.
Oh, I do have one more question.
Okay.
And this is more a question for the town manager and the finance director. At some point, can we get a translation of these numbers specific for these two? Well, really, I'm interested in the TC Passios project can that get translated into tax rate?
Yeah, I think Heather usually does that as soon as they have a number. But I'll let Heather speak to that. Or Karen, because Karen unmuted, so yes.
No, we can definitely do that. I'm sure David would do that as well, so.
I'm happy, Madam Chair, I'm happy to do that at the direction of the town manager and the finance director.
Yes, please.
Well, we're entering into a period of discussion here where somebody's going to say, all right, well, how much is this going to affect my tax bill?
Absolutely,
So we ought to be able to answer that question.
absolutely.
I will, Madam Chair, I'm happy to run as many sets of numbers as the town manager and the finance director direct me to.
It's like, how many spreadsheets would you like to read? Okay. Then
Well-
if there's no other questions, then Mr. Eisenthal, thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, you
David.
too. Those are big numbers. They're all big numbers. Everything is a big number tonight.
No kidding.
So. Now I just have to remember who I'm bringing in first. I think it might be Chief Sullivan, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, you're just gonna say that just because you hope so. I believe it was, but
It is.
I don't know. We may have to check on that.
yeah, it's gonna arm wrestle.
Hey, I was here first.
That is true, you were. All right, so anyway, so we'll go ahead with the departmental budget presentations, and we will begin with Chief Sullivan, representing the fire department budget. Chief Sullivan, did you want to share your own presentation, or did you want somebody else to pick it up?
I will give it a shot and see if I can share it here. My experience with Zoom consisted of a TV show on WGBH in the 70s.
Oh, that Zoom.
Ah,
Oh, that's pretty frightening.
It was a good show.
yeah,
That's a good.
I'm glad at least there's a couple people here that remember it. Come on. Can everybody see it?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yes.
Okay. All right. So very good. So for the fire department, we consist currently of 7 career firefighters, approximately 34, 35 call firefighters, plus myself and my administrative assistant. And this is showing the wrong budget. Stand by. That's last year's. Terry, do you want to put it up on yours? This doesn't seem to be working the way I wanted it to. I don't hear you. I don't hear you, Terry.
Chris,
can
do you
put it
happen to
up.
have it up, or Peter, you have it?
Yeah, let me just,
Okay.
I'm not
Okay,
sure
Peter,
how
go
it
for
managed to find the one from last year because I don't have that on this computer.
I keep unmuting myself. I keep muting myself. I'm sorry.
yeah, let me just, I'm
If
playing.
not, I'll
games
give it
with
another
screens here.
shot. I don't know where it found that one.
This is the one.
Peter's got it up.
That
Yep,
is the one.
Yep.
Okay, so again, currently 7 career firefighters, approximately 35 on-call firefighters. For those that aren't familiar with it, those are people, they respond from home. They get paid by the hour when there's a call, plus myself and my administrative assistant. You can go to the next slide. Minimum staffing right now currently is 2 firefighters, 24/7. The career staff covers the station Monday through Saturday, and 2 per diem firefighters covered on Sunday. In addition, Monday through Friday, we have 1 career and 1 per diem that work shifts. So some days is 3, and occasionally we'll have 4. Right now, 2 people are completing paramedic training, so they're sort of covering each other's shifts during the daytime when they're doing that. And then myself and the administrative assistant are available when we can be available Monday through Friday as well. Next slide. Again, duties, fire department. We still say fire department on the side of the truck, but we're really an all hazards response agency. We handle fire suppression, emergency medical services, hazardous materials incidents, special rescue, plus fire prevention, public education, and constant training for our own personnel. You can go to the next slide. In 2020, we had 1,955 calls for service, broken down as you can see. Again, about 70% of our calls is EMS at 962 calls. That's slightly up from the year before, about 4%. You can go to the next slide. And again, that's just a quick summary of what our responses have been over the last 10 years. Again, there was a steady climb. They dropped for a little bit. We seem to be creeping back up again. That seems to sort of go along with development in town. You can go to the next slide. And again, this one's just a little bit of a breakdown of when our calls are during the daytime. Sometimes people have asked, that's one of the reasons we staff extra people Monday through Friday during the day, because our call volume picks up during the day. Plus it allows us to go out and conduct inspections during the daytime. Excuse me, and still leaving a crew to staff the ambulance or an engine if there's a call. We do start to see that's extending further out into the evening, and that some of the additional staffing, we're looking to try to cover that and have a few more people around for that. Next slide. Again, this is just a quick graph of the effects of new growth over the last 13 years from the various large projects in town. The big takeaway from that is you can see that it definitely increases our EMS calls. They always talk about effects of new growth. People talk about schools more than anything, but it does affect us, especially residential. We do see a definite uptick in the EMS responses. Next slide. And again, this is also by the project. You can see some of them. The quick takeaway is Emerald Place and Tri-Town seem to be our where we do a lot of our work. Those two seem to be very busy. We haven't seen a big uptick out of the Rogers Way project yet. Whether we will in years to come, I'm not sure. But just kind of to give you an idea of what we see from the development in town. Next slide. Proposed budget for 2020 is one additional career firefighter paramedic. It continues paramedic training for people that we have hired that aren't paramedics that we need to train. We look at transitioning to the paramedic level sometime in early FY22. I'll talk about that in a little bit more later on. There were some above target requests, specifically to a slight increase in the EMS Coordinator Stipend because of the additional duties of going to paramedic. A request for additional funding for the training line item to cover paramedic school, and an increase in our protective clothing line. I'll talk about that a little bit further on too. Next slide, please. Again, that's just our salary, overtime and call firefighter salary breakdowns over the last few years. This year, hopefully the overtime budget's a little better funded. That's been kind of a moving target as we've added staff over the last few years. We don't really have a great history because the numbers keep changing to try to pin that down, but that should be a little bit better covered this year. Next slide, please. Again, the budgets should support one additional firefighter paramedic. That's year 4 of the 5-year staffing plan. We would continue supplementing with about 88 to 96 hours of per diem coverage during the week, and that still maintains the call force. Again, even with what we have, it's only 2 to 3 people in the station. That's enough to staff the ambulance or one engine company at a low strength. We still need all the call people to come back in, staff the other apparatus, backfill the station when the career staff are out. So they'll still be a vital part of our operation for many years. Next slide. Just a quick breakdown. People always ask about the overtime. The estimated overtime cost is based on the earned time off for the career staff, a potential of some, but not all of the sick time that they could be entitled to, holiday coverage, some callback because we expect the career staff to come back when there are calls to help cover the station, respond to fires, training, things like that. And again, the question's been asked a couple of times, so I always mention it again. We're already at a minimum staffing, so running short like some of the big cities do, that they'll just not fill a couple positions. We really can't do that because we're at bare bones to begin with right now with only 2 to 3 people. By law, we have to have 2 people just to roll the ambulance. So just to kind of give you an idea there. Next slide. Again, paramedic training, just an update on it. For FY21, just this month, we put 2 people on, 1 basic EMT and 1 person in the final stages of paramedic training. We still have a challenge at hiring. Licensed paramedics are in high demand, and we have had trouble attracting them. On the last round of hiring, we advertised through Worcester County. We had no paramedics actually apply. The closest we had were 2 that were in training, and 1 withdrew before the final process was done. The other challenge we've had that slowed the process down somewhat was COVID, which put a 6 to 7 month delay on everything we were doing because the people we had in training were shut out of training at hospitals for several months. They weren't able to get back in until the fall. So that pushed about 6 to 7 months out on where they were supposed to be. Originally, we were supposed to have people hopefully certifying right around now. Now we're looking at May or June. Go ahead, next slide. So again, basically timeline, we've purchased some of the initial ALS equipment or paramedic equipment for the ambulance in October. We're looking at May to June of 2021. 2 people will be able to test and certify as paramedics. In July, we're looking at hiring 1, possibly 2 personnel. We may have 1 retirement coming in during that time. Sometime summer 2021, we're looking at going for the paramedic license if all goes according to schedule. In that same time frame, we'll probably be looking to obtain the other batch of ALS equipment for the other ambulance. Currently, it looks like we should be able to get that through the CARES Act funding. We were able to get some of that equipment back in October, in October through that. So hoping by mid to late next year, 2022, actually, I'm sorry, 2021, we'll be able to start going for the license. And then sometime in 2022 to early 2023, we should have enough people certified that will be at the full level 24/7. Next slide. Again, state allows us 3 years from issuance of a license to provide 24/7 paramedic care. We have to have at least 1 paramedic on duty at all times after that 3-year period. So the plan is to get 1 more after this year to give us enough. That would give us 1 to 2 paramedics on each shift by mid-2023. Sorry, losing my voice here, drying up. Next slide, sir. The other budget items was an increase to the Ems Coordinator Stipend, $234. It brings it up to $1,500, which puts it even with the ALS coordinator position in the collective bargaining agreement. The current EMS coordinator is not a union position and is technically superior to that ALS coordinator position. We're just trying to bring some fairness to that. We asked for an additional $10,000 in training coverage for paramedic school with the anticipation of additional hours to cover. We could potentially have 2 people in school at least part of the same time. So we might have to cover a few more hours. And there was also a request for an increase in the capital protective equipment line item of $10,000, which would bring us up to the point that we could again purchase 4 to 5 sets of turnout gear a year. It was $10,000 for many, many years. Once upon a time, that bought us 4 to 5 sets of gear. Due to inflation, that's dwindled down. So we're at about 2 to 2.5 sets of gear a year. That combined with the capital outlay request should put us back on track for many years. And hopefully we won't need another large capital request then. Next slide. Again, the capital plan for FY22 is $100,000 to replace up to 20 sets of firefighting personal protective equipment. The challenge we have with this is the equipment's between $4,000 and $5,000 a complete set. It has a 10-year lifespan on it. We're not supposed to use it after that. And a lot of the recommendations now is to have 2 sets for most of your personnel because it's supposed to be cleaned after every incident or after every fire. What we found is the big concern is carcinogens from the exposures at fires gets into the gear. We're constantly exposed to it every time we put the gear on if we don't wash the equipment and clean it. Cleaning it is good, but it takes the equipment out of service for up to 48 hours while it's washed and dried, reassembled. So having some replacement gear for firefighters so they're not completely out of service is something that we're looking at. We've attempted to get this through other funding sources. You can go to the next slide. In FY21, there was a legislative earmark and a bond bill. We have seen no movement on that. The town manager and I have tried to track down on that. We have had no luck with that. We've tried an assistance to firefighters grant in the past year for protective equipment. We did not get that. We are waiting on a $15,000 grant currently from the state for firefighting protective equipment. Last year, this was only $2,500. This year it was $15,000. It should allow us to get 4 sets of coats and pants, which was good because we had some destroyed due to chemical exposure at a fire recently. Insurance did not replace all of them. We're also applying for an AFG grant, again, to try to replace and update some of this equipment. But again, it's a very competitive process, and I'm not holding out much hope that we'll have much better luck than we did last year. Next slide. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we've seen for grants in the last year or so, the EMPG is a grant from the state. It's about $3,500. It allowed us to purchase traffic vests, some protective eye goggles, hearing protection for pretty much all of our personnel. This allows them to be a little bit safer, a little bit more reflective if we're out working in the street at car accidents, railroad incidents if we're near the tracks. This has been a big thing. We've had the vests for a long time. The original batch were about 10 to 15 years old. They're getting in kind of tough shape. So that brought us back up. We get the fire education funding, the SAFE or Senior Safe grant every year. COVID kind of put a dent in that because we couldn't do a lot of in-person education this year. We used it to help support some of the public events that went on in town, the drive-by for Santa, some of the other events in town. The senior side of it, we still do have the Sand for Seniors project going, and being able to go out and install smoke detectors in senior citizens' homes in town. That's still working out very well. We're hoping as we go into the next year, things will be more back to normal. We can get back into the schools and have a little bit more effect there. We've got several people trained as educators. We were just able to train another firefighter this year. And so now we have about 4 firefighters that have gone through a program to teach in the schools and help out there. Next slide, please. Vehicle maintenance, hopefully replacing 3 frontline units in basically a year's time should knock down some of our maintenance costs, although the unanticipated challenges or unanticipated expenses still keep popping up. We had a vehicle damaged by a drunk driver. Insurance covered most of that, but we still do have a copay. We had another vehicle that had a significant electrical short circuit that damaged quite a bit of wiring in the truck. That's still out for repairs now. Again, covered under insurance, but we're still on the hook for some of it. We've seen quite a cost savings being able to use a DPW mechanic. I can't say enough good things about the work that he does, and that has made a big difference. But again, these vehicles are very specialized, so a lot of times we do have to send repairs out due to the complexity, usually to the dealerships. Next slide. Again, our apparatus, we run 3 engines or pumpers. One also functions as our heavy rescue unit, a ladder truck, 2 forestry units, 2 ambulances, a water rescue unit, which is an old ambulance that was retired from that service, and 3 support vehicles. Again, the pictures there, the 2 newest pumper and the ladder truck that seemed like it was never going to come, but it came. They're working out very well for us. And again, next slide. The engines, we expect about a 20-year lifespan. The aerial ladder, 25. Forestry trucks, 30 years. And the ambulances and support vehicles are about 10 years. The ambulances right now are taking the most heavy pounding on mileage. Rescue 1 is a 2014. It's already at 80 something thousand miles. That's just a function of a lot more calls, and we're running further distances to like Emerson Hospital or UMass and Worcester. That truck is the backup ambulance now, but it still goes out quite a bit. And so that's always going to be a challenge for us. Next slide, please. So the impact of budget is recommended. One additional full-time person will allow us to cover more time during the week. The goal is to get the coverage out so we have career staff 7 days a week, and then using the per diem to supplement that career staff. That's under negotiations right now, but that's sort of the direction we're trying to go. Planned implementation of the paramedic program in early FY22. Again, first steps, it would be limited coverage, not 24/7. And we hope to get full coverage in sometime in FY22 to early FY23. Next slide. And the above target funding would provide additional funding to support the paramedic training, and it restores our capital protective equipment back to a sustainable cycle. And I believe, because that's it. I think one more slide. I think, yep, that's it. So hammered right through that fairly quick. Slides are tough on this. Thank you, Peter. And if anyone has any questions.
Let me just start with when you talk about the above target numbers, those are numbers that are actually in the budget that is going to be being presented.
And the budget that is presented by the town manager, she has supported those above target requests at this time.
Okay, and then going back to the old question of the overtime, is it still true that it's part of a contractual arrangement that full-time firefighters are offered? Would you say that for the most part, when there's paid time off, for the most part, that's covered by full-time firefighters picking up overtime?
It is offered to the full-time staff first. If they are not interested, it goes to the per diem staff. Currently, about 60% is covered by per diem. The other 40% is covered by career. And again, I always say that can be a moving target because that can change with the people.
Right.
You get different people in that number may go up, but that's currently about where it is now.
Okay. Chris?
Do you have an understanding the reason it's hard to attract paramedics? Is it just a supply side? Are we not offering enough benefits pay, or?
All of the above. There's a demand for paramedics right now. Our pay scale and the work week for our personnel is below what a lot of the other communities are in the area, and we have that challenge. And that, like I said, I had a couple people expressed interest, and they never actually pulled applications and backed out for various reasons. But I know for at least one of them was coming from a similar department. They were starting at $2 an hour more than us. And that's on the same work week. And our work week is a 48-hour week. Most departments are working a 42-hour week in the area. So it is a challenge. So mostly the people we've been hiring are basic EMTs, and then we have to send them to school for paramedic.
So is anyone looking at that?
It's being discussed, and we're in contract negotiations right now. So it is being discussed.
Okay. And then the other question I had you mentioned that a lot of the transports are at either Emerson or Worcester. Is that some effect of like local hospitals closing, or?
It's some of it. I mean, and I would say the vast majority, last time I did the numbers, about 85% go to Leominster, about 15% go to Neshoba, and the rest are out to like the outlying hospitals. Some of that is a factor of people moving to this area from the east that still have their doctors down that way. So we see some demand to want to go back to Emerson. There's also a factor of specialized things like with UMass Medical Center, trauma patients that may need surgery immediately, or someone that's having an actual heart attack and they're having heart muscle damage. The local hospitals aren't fully equipped to deal with that. So a lot of times with paramedics, we go right to UMass and that. So what we used to see 20 years ago, we didn't do it that often. Maybe it was a couple times a year. Now it's a couple times a month. And
Okay.
that's just based on the medical care that they need.
So then the final question I had is on the protective clothing. You mentioned that if we get the capital request and we increase the operating budget for that, that you don't see an issue for years. But I'm just wondering if you kind of spike 20 sets this year, 10-year max, is it actually work out the math that way that we don't have to have another spike because we're not phasing them?
With hopefully right now, I mean, the equipment the people are wearing is good. So that lasts for a while. Yeah, we'll have a bump with that 20 sets, but each year we go out 10 years. If we're buying 5 sets a year, that's 50 sets. We're not at 50 people. So I'm hoping what we might have to see is we might have to bump that line in the budget every, maybe 5-6 years down the road. We might have to go up a little bit more depending on inflation. But I'm hoping we wouldn't have to do the capital again.
Okay.
And my plan would not be to be doing that every 10 years. That's not the great way to buy turnout gear. Because again, like anything else, it wears at different rates. Some people, they'll last 10 years in the same set of gear. Some people that are very active, you might get 5 out of it.
Yeah, and my desire would be that that's just out of the operating budget, and the operating budget goes up what it needs to support
It's where it should be, right? It had been brought up years ago, right around when I first started. It might have even been the chief before me, and they didn't move on it at the time. We had gotten a bump a few years ago because we had applied for something on an AFG grant after the 3rd time. We'd also put it in, it was protective equipment. It was in the capital plan. We got it, and then we got the AFG grant as well. And at the time, we were allowed to reuse the money in the capital plan to buy turnout gear instead. So that bumped us about 8 sets. Then at the time, I said that would buy us about 10 years. It bought us about 8.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, the one other question I have is related to whether or not you're seeing, I guess, an improvement I know that there for a period of time there were a lot of charges going out, but because you might be the second town, you weren't the first ambulance on scene, that you weren't necessarily hitting the revenues that you were billing out. So I guess I'm just curious if you've seen improvement in there.
Not quite sure what you're looking at. I mean, we transport about 69% of the calls that we go on for EMS, we transport on.
Mhm.
Where we lost revenue was when we were down an ambulance for a while. We had several back-to-back calls that we could have transported. The big thing is that when we finally go paramedic ourselves, we can charge for that. Right now, we're sort of limited on that. So the whole thought has been once we get up and running at the paramedic level, we can generate more revenue. And that, again, it's never gonna be an enterprise fund. It would offset some of our costs.
Right. Yeah, certainly the cost to equip the ambulances that,
Right. It'll offset some of our manpower, some of the equipment.
Sure.
But again, we gotta get there first.
Yep. Any other questions for Chief Sullivan? Oh, I'm sorry,
Yep.
Dave.
That's all right, Terry. I would have said something if you didn't spot it. Chief, good evening. Great presentation, very understandable, and covered all of the key points that were, I think, important to all of us. Just to reiterate on the discussion about the gear, capital planning had quite a bit of discussion about the same issues that we talked about here a few minutes ago, and made it very clear that our desire was that, and going forward, we would support in any way we could the line item being supplemented whenever it needed to be, so it doesn't come back as another capital need 5, 10, 15 years from now. Capital Planning Committee very much agrees that some of this stuff needs to get either moved into or stay in the departmental budgets rather than coming up as capital on a cyclic basis. My other comment, our frustration with money that has been set aside in bond issues over the past few years, I think, is really come to a head now that we have a new legislative delegation. I'm not sure if you're getting any answers or response back from them or not in your inquiries. I fear that we're going to have trouble with those funding sources for the next multiple years. I'm saying at least 5 years. We've been lucky for the past 5 or 6 years with the amount of money that has come in through earmarks and bonds. And I guess we need to really be pressuring our delegation to come forward with money like we've seen in the last few years. Yeah, it's a difficult time. COVID has changed a lot of things, but the state overall budget-wise and funding-wise is not in a terrible condition so far. So I think if we make enough noise, maybe the squeaky wheel will get some oil and we can pull some of these funds and get them loosened up. Thank you.
Actually, I would just follow that up. Now, you did mention that you were finding that there were some supplies you were able to get through COVID funding. Is that, how would you describe that in terms of helping you out?
No, that's how, I mean, we were able to purchase one of the defibrillator monitors out of that, and that's $30,000 right there. And I mean, we'd be looking at purchasing a second one. We originally had that on the capital plan and we withdrew it. After speaking with the town manager, it looks like we'll be able to get that and a few of the ancillary equipment through that. So that is helping us out quite a bit.
Yeah, that sounds like a good chunk.
I think the other thing we need to have in the back of our mind again too is that eventually this CARES Act funding is going to go away.
Yep.
So don't be counting on it down the road to keep us moving forward like we've been able to do, unless we have the revenues within the town.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it goes away.
Yeah,
Definitely.
amen.
Definitely. All right, Chief, thank you very much for your presentation. And I guess, well, you've really set the stage for Chief Gamble now, so, you know.
Did you set the stage to make this quick, or do we want to keep going for another hour? Peter has got my presentation, so.
Peter has got it? Okay, very good.
But if he clicks it fast, we'll get through it quick. All right. Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the committee for, this is my first budget presentation, and it's an honor to be here to present this. And I promise not to be long-winded. I know I'm last, and it's tough to be the last guy up here, but some valuable information that I hope to impart to you. Next slide, please. The next slide I have up is our organizational chart, and just a snapshot of what we do and how we're organized here. Currently, we're comprised of 18 full-time police officers, 11 reserve officers, a desk officer, animal control officer, and a public safety coordinator. We have taken the department, looked at the organizational chart, and we've split it into 2 divisions. We split those divisions to efficiently operate and provide services to the town. The divisions are split up into an administrative function and an operations function. Within the administration function of the division is myself, the lieutenant, and the public safety coordinator. Within that division, we're responsible for the overall management of the police department, scheduling, budgeting, payroll, anything to do with internal affairs, records, all comes through us. The Operations Bureau, we've broken it up into 4 different categories: patrol, investigative services, traffic positions, and a community policing bureau. The patrol works 4 shifts. We have a day shift, eve shift, and a night shift, and a split shift. The investigative division consists of detectives and a detective sergeant. That is currently vacant right now as we're trying to backfill some positions as we had some vacancies. We recently reassigned a patrol officer to the traffic division, and he is handling all of our traffic incidences when he's on shift. That includes any complaints that we receive on a regular basis, any type of study that we need required for the roads in towns, the roads within a town. Our Community Policing Bureau involves our school resource officer and our community outreach officer. He's a combined position right now, and I think everybody knows him more so by Hank than the officer himself. I think he gets more accolades than anybody else in this town, to be honest with you. But it really is an essential part of what he does, being a part of the school and being a part of the community outreach. Next slide, please. So with that being said, what we look at is when we start looking at performance measures, it's for us, it's a little difficult because what we're looking at is what are our stats? And sometimes when your stats are really high and they start really climbing, it's almost a reflective of people think that it's not safe out there. And that can be totally opposite. It just means that at times we have a really proactive police department. We have officers that are really out there working hard, and they're trying to provide the great service for our town. This is just a snapshot of what we've done in the past year. Even in the year of COVID, we've been fairly busy. The officers responded to over 20,000 calls within 2020 by December 31st. In 2019, by comparison, it was only 21,000. So we're just about 1,000 less within a COVID year. Our arrest totals was 382 total, 118 in custody, 256 summonses, and 8 protective custody. This number I had anticipated to climb significantly this year, and it actually leveled out. Within the first 3 months of 2020, we had over 135 arrests. That's between custody and summonses, which is an incredible amount for a town our size, especially within the first 3 months of a year. Motor vehicle accidents is still fairly high to medium to high. We're looking at 236 for the year. We had some injuries with 58. MVAs without injuries, 134. We investigated 44 hit and run accidents. With a COVID year, we have to take precautions. Officers, as much as proactive we want them to be, they took precautions, and that reflected in some of our motor vehicle stops, which were on the low side this year with 2,400 approximately for the year. Within those stops, they had 114 civil fines. Citation warnings were 627, and then with the criminal offenses that go with that ties in with the arrest, was 175. Next slide, please. So one of the concerns, and I believe everybody should have got a narrative, if I'm correct, and it really delves into a lot of the reporting and how the reports are out there. One of the concerns that I've seen, and I think is a direct result of COVID, and it's a direct result of probably the effects of isolation. Domestic violence is on a rise, which is not a good sign. We're looking at 101 incidences that the officers responded to. We reported 41 restraining orders. That's a 42% increase in call increase from 2019. It's a 156% increase in ROs that were issued since 2019. And again, without a significant study, but I think we really got to examine that these are the effects. These are effects of isolationism. These are effects of people being home significantly together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's a difficult situation to deal with. With our animal control service, she responded to 260 calls. She's still relatively busy, even in a COVID year. She had 15 dog bites to respond to and 11 kennel inspections. Next slide, please. So this is our budget. And what we look at our budget is a majority of our budget, as you're going to see, is on the top line is salaries, is police salaries. We've asked for $15,000 approximately over budget, over target, and I'll explain that in a couple slides here. Everything else, as you can see, is fairly level funded until you get down to the radio watch for our district. That's an increase, and that's an assessment for every town that's involved in Neshoba Valley. Next slide, please. So this is just a pie chart to explain the salaries. If you put together our lockup salaries, radio watch plus our salaries, it's the major part of what our budget is. Next slide, please. So our above target requests. some situations have developed. As our department grows, we'll talk about the first one, the detective position. We promoted Lieutenant Thibodeau. He was a detective sergeant prior to that. Once we did that and we started hiring on and we started adding on more people, we realized that we have a very young department, and our backbone of any police department is a patrol force. And one of the things that I really lean on is to have supervision with those patrol officers. So the decision was made to, instead of bringing back a detective sergeant, we reallocated that position to patrol, who now works a split position. With that being said, as we become fully staffed and we start bringing on our people, we're going to backfill that detective's position. Currently, contractually, it's an 8% raise above the top step patrol, and that would incur a $5,500 increase in our budget. Shift differential. This is a really difficult thing to get a handle on, and it's always a moving target. Some of those reasons are when you start adding patrol shifts, we're obligated to pay those differentials for 3 to 11, 11 to 7, and at times when we have to backfill those shifts, if people are out, we have to fill overtime. That incurs a cost of shift differential. On top of that, we have put a sergeant in one of those split shifts, and he's incurring a higher contractual amount. So we're seeing an increase of at least 2 days a week. Some other factors that go along with this is higher paying employees. Everybody gets their step raise. We're starting to see an increase with that. One of the things that we can hopefully keep those costs down is when we have to fill those shifts. If we can't get a full-time officer to fill the shift, we put a reserve in that position. When we put a reserve in that position, it reduces the cost of that shift differential because they're not entitled to it by benefit package. Next slide, please. This is our request for an additional officer for fiscal 22. The cost is actually incorporated into our salary, which has been approved by our town manager. What we did was we took a look at how we're hiring, and we realized that by the time we get a person hired, vetted, and get them into the academy, we never realize a full year's salary. So what we did was we examined the last few hires, see where we were at the hiring process, when could we get them in the academy. And we did realize that, a full year's salary just wasn't feasible. And it wasn't going to help or, to ask for that. So what we did was we cut the salary in half, the benefits in half. A new hire is not entitled to benefits until they graduated from the academy. And the way it looks like right now, with the new hire that we're looking for, we probably wouldn't get that person into an academy until December or January. And that is dependent on how the academies are run, when the next availability of an academy is coming up. And we also have to examine and realize that police reform is going to affect this, the bill that was just recently signed. So there might be a lot of changes that come down the road. And this is one of the reasons why we broke this down this way. Next slide, please. If I start getting a little hoarse, I'm sorry. Football practice takes a lot out of you during the day. So with that being said, the numbers are a little off from our 10-year staffing plan, just because of the way we broke it down, and the 10-year staffing plan was already put in place, and we had to make some adjustments. And what we did was, when we looked at it, we're able to absorb some of those costs in our level funding that's already been approved. And that's because that person's not going to realize court time. He's not going to realize overtime. Firearms training is included in the academy ranks. So those are some of the costs that we can alleviate and get them into the other funding areas. As we continue to grow, looking down the road, fiscal 23 and beyond, as we're adding officers, we really need to consider looking at a part-time administrative assistant and seeing what we can do to alleviate some of the workload that we're putting on Amanda. Amanda's here with me now, but some of the workload that we're putting on her, because as we increase our staffing, that means processing citations increase, filing increases, maintaining personnel and training files increases. And on top of it, just on a side note, we threw in their LTCs are probably going to be at an all-time high, license to carry firearms within the next year here. All the other stuff that goes along with the administrative work that we look in as we add officers. Next slide, please. So that fits perfectly into our goals. To next slide and transition right into this. So when we look at our 10-year plan, we look at it, how can we be the most effective and provide the best services we can for the town? And for years, we have been really behind in hiring and behind in keeping up with what the population is in the town. And, you know, as this 10-year plan was in place, it was a way to increase our staffing incrementally without putting a huge strain on the budget. As we realize these positions, we will continue to re-examine our organization and see where we best fit these officers. But as we continue to grow, we can continue to add specialty positions such as a detective, a separate community resource officer, and a separate community outreach officer, an additional traffic officer. This allows us to continue and participate in our community police initiatives. Opioid abuse, try to combat that as best we can. Our RAD program for Defense for Women, Citizens Police Academy that hopefully, if we can get out of this COVID situation, we can bring back here. And eventually start developing and partner with groups that assist us with mental health crisis. I really believe that we haven't seen the full effects of what COVID has done right now mentally and for mental health. I don't think we have realized what schools are dealing with yet or going to deal with kids being home and not in school and not being active participants in school, whether it's hybrid or it's full remote learning. I just don't think we have fully realized yet. And the closer we can get to developing teams to help out schools, to help out the community, the better off we all are. Next slide, please. So goal 2, we started the accreditation process years ago, and my goal is to complete it. One of the things that we look at here is it's an independent audit of our policies and procedures. It ensures 2 things. Number one, that we are abiding by our policies, and it's a risk management tool. This risk management tool, in theory, reduces liability claims on the police department and on the town. It provides us with a direction of best practices. What's the best practice throughout our country and law enforcement? And it's a way for us to gain knowledge to make sure that our policies and our procedures are in line with that. This was brought up, I believe, in a capital planning meeting because we had requested a records room. And I believe that was one of the questions that came up. And at the time, it was asked, is there any grant funding tied to this? At the time that question was asked, absolutely not. It was one of those things that, you know, the department enhances their reputation and public confidence. And that was one of the goals of this. With the recent police reform being signed into law, this type of accreditation is going to be tied into grant funding. I was just recently contacted and requested for our use of force policy to maintain eligibility for DOJ discretionary grant funding in 2021. The use of force policy has to be certified, and the certifying body in Massachusetts is the Mass Police Accreditation Commission, who we're working with right now to get our policies accredited. So it would behoove us to complete this and continue in that direction. There is an annual fee with this, and we incorporate it into our expenses. It's an $1,800 fee a year. And again, my goal is to get this completed. Next slide, please. Training. I spoke about this last year, and actually it was nice to see everybody in person last year, not sitting here behind a computer screen and doing it this way. Training is a huge part of what we do. I honestly believe, first of all, it's mandatory, 40-hour mandatory training for all sworn officers, including reserves. That includes legal update, our CPR, first aid, defensive tactics, firearms, and any additional professional development that we could provide. As I spoke last year, a lot of our officers are like sponges. They love the training and they believe in it. And I believe in it. I believe that an officer that is better trained is better able to handle situations out on the street. And I think the more training that we can get officers, the better they are going to be able to handle themselves. And it just leans to the fact of professionalism. Next slide, please. Evaluation. I think this is something that we need to work towards, and it's a way to evaluate our officers and our employees here within the police department. It allows us to give feedback to our employees, and it lets them know how well they're doing or how poorly they're doing. And I also believe that it's a tool that we can use to focus training. If we find an officer that is deficient in a certain area, we can take that information and move them towards that training to get them to be a better officer. You know, to me, this type of thing is a valuable tool because we value our employees and we want to keep them here. As we continue on, I continue talking here a little bit. You're going to find that I'm going to talk a little bit about police reform in a minute, but we're going to have a difficult time recruiting and retention of police officers in the Commonwealth, and especially for municipalities of our size. And we have to make sure that these evaluation processes, that these officers are being recognized for the good work they do. It also assists us with getting officers ready for promotion. Whether they're ready or not, we can give them feedback, they can give us feedback, and we can move into a different direction. Next slide, please. I threw this in the presentation just to show, this is from FY21. I wanted to show that we consistently look for grant funding to alleviate or try to alleviate some big cost items that we're looking at or needs that the police department has. And I got to tell you, one of the programs that we got, or the grants that we got, was for the body-worn cameras. And it was really a great moment, I think, for the police department because it was a very competitive grant. At $36,000 to get that type of grant, I think is a significant amount of money for our police department. And I believe a lot of our guys are, and I would say 100% are on board with this, and they're looking forward to getting these up and ready and getting them going. And again, I believe this came up in capital. I'm not sure if it was Dave or somebody had asked me about storage and what is the long-term storage? Is this going to be a huge capital project that we got to look at? Is it something that's really going to cost us down the road? The cost for storage, we are going to keep it in-house. We have decided to keep it as an evidentiary-based product here at the station. We have awarded the bid to Custom Signals, I'm sorry. And through conversations with them, we decided that we don't need cloud storage and we're going to keep it here. That fee is a yearly fee of $764 a year. That fee is going to be part of our expenses, and that's how we will incorporate it. It's $500 for licensing and $264 for what they call is a cloud fixed storage. The cloud fixed storage allows us to transfer videos to DA's office or requests through email or any type of medium like that. As for the speed and patrol sign, the speed sign and patrols, we actively try to work with the Mass DOT to get these grants for directed patrols, clicker tickets, OUI patrols. And then we were able to get a couple speed signs. As you can see, a nice picture there with flashing lights that'll go on it, and we'll be able to post it in town. We were also able to secure a grant through Maya for our security system upgrade here. And honestly, I got to give kudos to our town manager who was able to secure some funds for our cruisers through Green Communities. And it helped bring down costs of 2 cruisers that we purchased this year. Next slide, please. Capital plan, we're looking at 17.5 for bulletproof vests. We're at the end of the cycle. We're at the end of the lifespan for these vests. One of the questions that was posed to me, it was earlier about this, is there a way we can increment it? Unfortunately, we're in a cycle where most of these vests that we need, the officers have been here and they're at the 5-year cycle. The new officers that are coming in, we have to purchase vests for them, and it's going to be another 5-year cycle. These vests, they have a 5-year lifespan, and once they expire, they expire. We wouldn't want to take a chance of putting an officer out there with an expired vest and something tragic happening. Replacement of 2 Mark Cruisers, and that's part of the scheduled replacement that we have on our plan. With that being said, that is it. I would, before ending here, like to thank Heather Lemieux for her assistance. This is my first budget, and obviously I've seen a lot of these and I've been through a lot of these, but to actually put it together is a lot of work. And I had a lot of questions. I'm sure they weren't the brightest of questions, but trying to get through some of this stuff. And my administrative assistant and public safety coordinator, Amanda Moore, putting together the numbers and helping me through this as being a first-year chief, it was huge. And publicly so thank you to both of you.
Congratulations. Well done. And I could see hands popping up everywhere. So Evan.
Thank you, Chief. That was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. Hold on, I have a visitor. Couple of questions, and actually this one, the first one kind of ties in with something I should have asked when Chief Sullivan was up as well, but just for my own sort of edification, are the salaries that are on both budgets, are they negotiated by unions?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a schedule coming up for when the next series of collective bargainings are happening for either department?
I believe our contract for our union members are up next year.
Okay. Okay. Is that reflective of the budget plan that's put forward then for 22, as that's just sort of what the expected increase is going to be?
Well, their contract doesn't expire until the end of fiscal 22, so we would have to reflect that in the fiscal 23.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. The next one then is the part-time admin that you had put, that you're talking about for fiscal year 23. Is that to fill work that's predictive based on the new positions, especially specialty positions you mentioned, or is it basically the admin is currently overloaded as it is?
Both. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And currently my public safety coordinator is overloaded.
Okay.
Trying to spread some work out, but it's just difficult because we have patrol officers and stuff like that.
We wanted to just add a few comments. Can you hear me okay?
Of course, yep.
We plan to bring this forward next year. We want to look at several surrounding communities. There are several communities in our area that do have at least more than one full-time admin staff. So we plan to have a full presentation for this next year. We just wanted to bring it up this year that this is something that we have identified as a future need. So we can just at least bring it to the table, but we do plan to have a full workup of what we would propose the position be, as well as where they would fall within the union, as well as some other studies. So this was just something to bring it forward as something that we have identified as something that could really be helpful for the department as we continue to grow.
Does it make more sense then to put in a request for a full-time employee as opposed to part-time? If she's already, if you're talking about adding 4 specialty positions down the road, and then you're just asking for, you're sort of starting off the part-time admin overloaded.
I think we should start with the part-time and reevaluate. I think, again, we are going to do a study on this, and we'll see where we are next year and how we would present this. But I wouldn't want to put forward the thought of a full-time position. Then we do this study and we say, oh, geez, we really don't need a full-time position. We need a part-time position.
Okay, but at least have the conversation out there.
Absolutely.
Understandable. And the last one was just on the storage, kind of piggybacking off of Dave's question from Think Town meeting. The storage fees, if it's all in-house, did I hear correctly that it's roughly $750 per year? Is there a cap for the actual storage on site with that fee?
No,
Up to-
it's the $500 of it is licensing fees every year that you have to pay for.
Okay.
The $264 is so we can have access to share the videos, and that's a
Okay.
So
Okay, so you're still responsible for the actual physical on-site storage.
yes, yes.
Okay. Has that been looked into at all? I mean, if you're talking, a couple dozen body cams, I have no idea what the video.
We absolutely looked into this, and I've had several conversations with our rep from Customs, the initial salesperson, and the manager. And we've been assured that we are at what we in future. We should be okay. I told her we are looking to add, and we would be close to 30 officers with cameras, and they were fine. They seem to think we're okay with this. And when you start looking at this, we do have a retention schedule, which is going to help us because at a certain point we're going to erase those videos. So it's constantly turning over.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter Beardmore.
You hear me?
Yep.
Okay, good. Hey, Chief, thanks for your presentation. Bear with me. I got a bunch of questions tonight. So want to start first talking about the K-9 unit. I noticed on your org chart, you didn't have the K-9 specified. Is that a regular patrol position?
It is. It was. We were in a position a few years ago when we had to promote somebody, and the person that was best qualified was our K-9 handler. And to take that K-9 and then all of a sudden put him to another patrol officer, it just wasn't feasible. That's why it's listed like that.
So that K-9 unit basically does the duties of a normal daytime or evening or nighttime patrol. I don't know what shift he's on. Fulfills the duties of a regular patrolman, and then the dog is used when the dog is needed. Is that
Correct.
kind of the idea?
Yeah.
But a police dog also requires a significant amount of recorded training that you folks need to maintain records on and that kind of thing. Does that pull away from the normal duties of a patrol officer?
It does, but we cover that with our training money in our training allocation. So we backfill that position when he has to go to training. And you're right, it is a significant amount. He does have to train quite a bit. Just the nature of what we're dealing with, right? You're not going to get K-9 calls every day. That's just not going to happen. That's just not the way it works. So for him to keep up, you would have to train. And that's a cost we incur in our training budget.
Speaking of which, is our K-9 unit unique? Or do surrounding communities have K-9 units?
Recently, yes. I believe Fitchburg has a K-9 program. Leominster's had a K-9 program, I think, within a few years of when we had it. Groton PD has one.
But you get called to mutual aid for the K-9 as well, right? Like I saw Jerry sniffing around a bank in Fitchburg a couple of months ago. So, okay.
And vice versa. If we need K-9s from Fitchburg, Leominster, they'll send them.
The vehicle for the K-9 unit had been deferred from the capital plan this year. Can you talk a little bit about that? And is the expenses associated with that vehicle, and does it have a longer life cycle, that kind of thing?
It does. It's a single officer use cruiser, so we're able to push it back. So our other marked cruisers, right? We're using them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those cars are out on the road, hard mileage. Single officer user, he works a 4 and 2 schedule. So the less mileage, the less wear and tear on the cruiser. As for the equipment, is quite a bit of expensive equipment that's put in there. And a specific type of vehicle, it's got to withstand the weight that's in there and the equipment that's put in there. So it is pretty specific to what we need for that, and it does get pretty costly. But our K-9 handler, Sergeant Tossi, after speaking with him and determining, he's a car guy too. He understands cars. He helps build cruisers. He understands it. He fully understands what I'm asking, and he believes that we could get at least another year or two out of that cruiser.
Okay. Speaking of time, Jerry has got to be probably 5 years into his service. Obviously, this is not a dog that is going to be in service for 10 years. What do you expect in terms of his service time and replacements and costs associated with replacements?
Sure. With his activity, it probably outlasts me. He's a very active dog. I think, honestly, within the next 2 to 3 years, we have to start looking at it. He is going to get to the end of his cycle, just the way things run with that. And what we're doing right now, and I've had conversations with Sergeant Tossi and how we can handle this in the future. He's in contact with the breeder constantly, who bred Jerry. And we are looking into trying to get a donation or grant funding for that dog. You're looking at anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000 for a dog that looks like Jerry. That's that type of working dog. But if we can keep working with the breeder and keep working this, we may be able to get a dog donated. And we have the equipment. We're already set up for the equipment. We're ready to go. And once we decide when it's time to put that equipment in a new car, we just transfer it over.
So there isn't $100,000 of additional training before we put a new dog into service. Sergeant Tossi is going to train the dog.
We have to make that decision when that time comes, because it's not ideal to have a patrol sergeant with a canine. The patrol sergeants really need to be in charge of the scenes. Maybe they need to direct people. When that canine's working, he needs to be working. He can't worry about what's going on around him. He needs to work. So we have to make that decision as we go along. But the training, again, that would be incorporated in our training line budget, and we would use that to train the officer. It does get expensive, and there's no way to sugarcoat it. It's not cheap. You're looking at several months of training to get that dog ready and to get the officer ready to that point.
Okay. Body cameras. When do you expect the body cameras to be put into service?
Well, they've been ordered. I had a 30-day turnaround, and I'm looking at sometime in March to get them here. When they arrive, the software and the computers will be set up, and we'll host a training. Once the training is done, we plan to get them out on the road.
And have you gotten an approved policy at this point that the police union and officers have agreed to?
I do. It's been signed. It's been sent out.
Okay, good. Accreditation. So you talked about police reform and the accreditation program, which, by the way, I applaud the concept of accreditation. I think it's great to have other eyes looking at what you're doing to make sure that you're not missing something and your policies and procedures are in line. I think that that's great. The document storage discussion has arisen a couple of times over the course of the last year. I think because it came up, as you had said, in a capital planning discussion some time ago. And I understand that there's potential grant funding down the road that would potentially relate to that. But is this a chicken and egg scenario where you have to have the storage to get the accreditation, but you need the accreditation to get the grant funding, or how does that work?
I don't think so, because I think right now we have a records room that's sufficient. Is there a need for it? Absolutely. I'm not going to say no, but we have a small records room where we can lock our current year's files, but we have to retain those files, right? And you're talking that those files have to be kept safe. They have to be in a locked room. So they have to be. We can't have an accident where these things catch fire, or they, get soaked and they're ruined. The public records law requires us to keep those records for a certain period of time. Can we make it through right now and get through accreditation and get accredited without a storage room? Absolutely. I see that as not an issue. Spending a few $100s to lock the room and change the way we store the records will be okay, and that'll be sufficient. But I think professionally, I think we'd want to store them properly and get a legitimate records room.
Okay. One last question. You had mentioned in your narrative that you've gotten call, or there's been an increase in calls related to fraud and online related types of activity. Do we have an officer that is trained in this type of activity, and or how do you handle it? I mean, obviously this is an area of specialization that
it's definitely a specialty type of investigation, because when you talk about these type of frauds and phone scams and stuff that we're dealing with, and one of the major ones is unemployment. I believe you've seen in that narrative,
yeah,
which is a huge increase because of COVID, right? People are out of work, people get fraud. And yeah, you do have to be specially trained. But our patrol officers can handle the basics of, you make the call, we'll investigate it as far as we can. But what happens is a lot of these fraud incidences are from overseas. And it really puts a really strain on how we investigate this, because obviously if it's over state lines or overseas, we're at a dead end. We provide this information to federal authorities. We've provided to the Fusion Center, which gets it out there and try to resolve these issues here. While we're on that subject, I implore everybody, if these things are happening, that they need to call us so we can keep track of this.
Okay, thank you.
Chris. You want to unmute first? Yeah. No.
Boy, it's getting long, huh?
I was on the call trying to. I was just going to say, if I reported every fraud call I got, I'd be calling you 10 times a day. The org charts are nice to see. And just generally speaking, I think if all the departments did that, I think that's a nice touch. It helps people to understand how, everything relates from a human perspective. You should put Jerry on there, though. I didn't see him on there, so.
I probably should put
feeling the love.
I think it'd be, I'd get everybody smiling.
Yeah. All right, so just a quick one on the body cam. How does that physically work? Like at the end of the shift, the officer comes in, they take it off, they put it in a charging station, and it automatically downloads or something? Like what is
I'm sorry, my screen just jumped. Yes, absolutely. That is exactly how it happens. At the end of the shift, they're required to put it into a charging station. Once that's in the charging station, it sends it out to the computer.
Okay, so there's no real labor increase associated with it.
No.
Okay. All right, and then so I'm looking at thinking about the salary trend, and you mentioned and you see we have a lot of junior officers who are not only gonna, we're gonna negotiate the COLA increases, but they're gonna start raising through the steps. So do you think that kind of the level service budget, like what's the impact on that in your mind on the level service budget over the next 5-10 years? Are you going to be a department that, is just going to have to ask for more than 2.5% to cover those two factors combined?
Yes, and absolutely. We're increasing our staffing level. Contractual obligations are going to increase that we have to maintain. And it would impact how our salary looks at that point.
Okay, so that's one thing we'll have to keep in mind as we're comparing salary to salary year after year, is that you're kind of at the early on that. And then what's your initial thoughts on the impact of police reform from a budget perspective over the next few years? Is there a rule of thumb that's out there amongst the police societies and
there's not a rule of thumb, but I think the financial impact, and we've had these meetings with the Chiefs of Police Association, the financial impact on municipalities is going to be tremendous. And I should have brought this up earlier, but part of police reform is one of the standards is certifications. And every police officer, every sworn officer has to be certified by the Post Commission. What they're looking at is every police officer has to be trained to the level of a full-time police officer. So if you're a reserve officer, you're going to have to make that training up somewhere. And the proposal that's out there right now and what they're looking at is called a Bridge Academy. The Bridge Academy will bring these officers up to a certain level, so they're at the same level as a full-time, or trained to the same level as a full-time police officer. With that being said, we have 11 reserve officers, and every one of them indicated to me that they want to stay here and they want to continue to work in Lunenburg. And if that's the case, we need to get them trained up to the level of full-time officer. Did a rough estimate. It's about $80,000 to $90,000 impact financially on our municipality. It's a hard pill to swallow. These reserves worked very hard to where they are. And to all of a sudden throw this certification out there and requirements, I just don't think it's the right thing to do. We will have some time. Certification process is going to go alphabetically once they get that incorporated. First year is A through M, second year M through whatever, and third year at that point. To me, police reform is going to have a huge impact on financially on us, just looking at the reserves. We depend on reserves quite a bit to help us. They're force multipliers. When we need them, they come right in. When we have major events going on in town, celebrations or anything else that we go on, they volunteer their time and they come in on a regular basis. So you can see the need that we have just by looking at a desk coverage and prisoner watches.
So that's $80,000 to $90,000 in total for the 11 reserve officers we have. Is your estimate?
Yeah, that's a rough estimate of what we're looking at, and that all depends because they haven't exactly come up with hours yet of what they're going to look at, and they're looking at anywhere from 200 to 250 hours per officer. And you know, we have to pay them. I mean, that's the bottom line. If we're going to trade, if they're going to be trained, we have to pay them.
So long-term implications on that, will the colleges and universities start to train in such a way that a graduating officer would have had that training?
Right now, Fitchburg State University is the only program out there that it's called the 4-in-1 program. So once they graduate college, they go through the academy over the summer. They attend one more year. They're certified full-time. They're certified full-time police officers with a master's degree and ready to be hired. Other than that, it seems like that the reserve intermittent academies that were out there are going by the wayside. I don't think we'll see those in the future. And I could be wrong. There's just not a lot of information about it yet. The post commission hasn't been decided yet. That hasn't been developed. The MPTC, our training council, is kind of in limbo right now, seeing what's going on with post and what the certification process is going to be.
Okay, so I guess a comment, and to echo a little bit of what Dave Passios had said in the previous presentation is, you know, if in their infinite wisdom, the folks on Beacon Hill want to pass these, you know, bills, they should also come along with the money to fund them. And this town pays a lot in state taxes. So, you know, we should be looking and writing to our legislators to pony up, you know, the funds related to the bills that they sign.
Chris, I absolutely agree 100%. And just for your own knowledge, to get the post commission up and running and all the other commissions that came out of police reform, 25 to $32 million. And none of that money is coming back to the municipalities in training forms or grants or whatever we need.
All right. Well, and thank you, and for all your team does.
Thank you.
And same to the fire, to Chief Sullivan as well. That's all I had.
Okay, Dave?
Yep. Good evening, Chief.
Evening, Dave.
Great presentation.
One thing first, hold on, time out.
Yep.
You have to make your question short. You talk to me when I see you at town meeting. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, not a problem. Now you got me off track on what I was going to talk about. Oh yeah, here we go. I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, do we have enough history with the new type of cruiser that we've been purchasing with the hybrids as to how that's working out? I know it's going to take some historical time to see on a cost per unit basis over its lifetime how they work out, but do you have any feel for it at this point?
No, not really, because they're so new and we have them, we just put them on the road and we're ready. About another month, we'll put the other one on the road. But Me personally, I think they're a great car. They're sharp, they're efficient, and I think it's going to be a well thought out purchase, and I think it's going to be work out well for us.
Something we had talked about, I believe it was probably a year ago, maybe a little bit more, with both your department, the fire chief, and DPW, or at least I brought it up, is I feel there's a real need for the town to start keeping track of the lifetime cost of its vehicles and some of its other assets, vehicles especially. The answer I got the last time around was, yeah, the information is all available, but it's in the form of there's some type of a maintenance program that you can access historical information through DPW with the work that they do on the vehicles. Fire department says, yeah, they're in a filing cabinet and you'd have to pull the receipts out. And I'm assuming the police department's the same way. In private business, there's a whole process of keeping track of the lifetime cost of a vehicle. And so when you say, they don't make them like they used to, then you've got the historical data to back that up and what the issues are with them. I just bring it up as another tool that I think the town of Lunenburg needs to take a serious look at.
I will say this, David, that I don't think I would ever give you that answer, that it's in a file cabinet or if it's tucked away somewhere. And if I told you that, I apologize, but I would get you that information.
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't put off with not being given the information. It's just that, the information, the way it's stored right now is not comprehensive for any particular vehicle. Whereas if we had a program that collected that data, then it would be available at, the click of a keyboard.
Right. Right. Fleet management software would be something that you would look at for that, but we try to maintain our vehicles here and keep an eye on them and really see what the life expectancy of those vehicles are. Because we do put on hard mileage. If you think about what we do on a regular basis, starting and stopping and, just the use of the car 24 hours a day. So, we keep an eye on the mileage, we keep an eye on what the costs of repairs are, and at a certain point, those cars are gone beyond the use of their life for us. But that doesn't mean we don't cycle them out. We can put them down to a spare car. And then eventually, as we purchase new cars, sell those cars off and get it back to the town.
Right. One last comment more than a question. As you just mentioned, cycling out vehicles, do you know if there's a conversation between departments and their needs before we cycle out vehicles and send them to auction?
I'm not sure about that, but our vehicles, when they're end of life, they're not worth cycling to another department. I think the cost of doing that it'd be more than what it's worth.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. Thank you very much, Chief, for the presentation. And you must be happy to have the first one behind you.
I am, but I have no cookies in front of me or pastries that I was looking forward to at these meetings. And, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Have a great night.
Thanks,
You
Chief.
too. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so that's the last departmental budget presentation for the evening. So we'll move on to Town Manager, Finance Director reports. Do we have any?
Muted.
I do have, if you can allow me to screen share.
Yep.
I have some dashboard questions. This one is just a demonstration of the adjustments from the target budget to the preliminary budget. So the top portion, for those of you who aren't familiar with the format, is the revenues on the top portion, where we started out with the target budget revenues, the adjustments that were made due to the change in state aid for the governor's fiscal 22 proposal, the recommendation to use special purpose stabilization funds for the purchase of the DPW vehicle in the capital plan, the amount recommended for free cash towards capital stabilization and OPEB, and a change in the indirect costs for sewer. The bottom portion demonstrates the expenditures, the changes from the target budget to the preliminary budget proposal, and down from the state aid numbers that were part of the governor's proposal, and all the additional changes in the operating budget, down to the OPEB cost, the amount to be deposited, stabilization amount same, and the capital plan, the additional that was outside the original 600,000 that was in the target budget. And I can send this.
And then basically the capital plan piece that incorporates both the stabilization fund transfer and the use of free cash. Is that right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
The on the amount that is going to the capital plan, that represents both the stabilization fund transfer and the use of free cash.
Let me put that back up.
You're going to email this, Heather?
Yes.
No, you must take very quick notes.
Yeah, it's so quick.
So which amount were you referring to, Terry?
The bottom one, the 899,000.
899. Yes, that's so the target budget included 600,000. The 899 is the difference to make up the total recommendation of the 1.499 million for capital.
Right, and that's from the use of free cash and the transfer funds from special purpose fund. Is that correct at the top?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. And then we don't have any more COVID in Lunenburg, is that true?
And
Can I ask a question on the change in IT? What was the drive down in that? I feel like we should be investing a little bit more in IT in town, but.
So the change in IT, hold on, I just close that.
And maybe it's going to come in a future budget and you can tell me that, but.
Yeah.
Do have Mr. Maladrino's coming in
Yeah.
same week we have the school committee coming in.
So that reduction, there was an increase, as I stated in my presentation, there's an increase in the hardware maintenance costs, sorry, the software line in the budget. But this amount also reflects a shift of the lease for the large copiers to the central purchasing budget. And that is that 19,300. So it's an overall decrease in IT, but there was an increase just because that amount was shifted to the central purchasing budget.
It just, I guess my comment goes back to one that we started early in this year, this cycle with going to like OneDrives and those kind of things. It just feels to me that the town needs to get out of email as the mode of, document transfers and repositories and all that kind of thing. And I don't know when in the budget that might be, what year it might be good to start making better investments in IT and coming into the 1990s maybe, but I think it's about time.
Yep, it's a good point. And like Peter said, yeah, IT is coming in the same night as the school.
Okay, and then the training that goes with it, I do understand that people may need to be trained on how to use some of these systems, but.
I totally agree with you, Chris. I think there's a whole other world in municipal automation that we haven't discovered yet.
And even the transparency to the public, I mean, they should be able to easily get every document that we're discussing in this meeting. It's all open. So.
So there's one other document. I want to show you due to new changes. Budget. So right now from the preliminary budget to today, there's no changes in the revenue side, but on the expenditure side, this is a reflection of full month premium, holiday premium for on the town side of the budget, as well as shifting our active rate for our health insurance for our active employees from 3% to the 0.47%. That's a total of $166,839. A change in our health insurance line. Monty Tech assessment, their preliminary assessment number, it's $13,453, less than the estimate we had in the budget. Our actuals came in for our workers' comp and liability insurances, and it's an overall difference of $210. So that brings the current surplus to $674,691, which out of that amount, a significant portion is what I would recommend go into the health stabilization account. Those are the only updates I have at the moment.
Any questions?
Heather, that surplus is outside of free cash, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have more on COVID or anything?
More on COVID.
Well, I guess one question I had for you is I saw something briefly today that some of these local community injection centers might be coming back on the table. Have you heard that?
So that's changing, just like the beginning of COVID. There's new updates, it seems, daily. So I've been working with the other town administrators and managers and then Neshoba Associated for the health district with Neshoba, as well as our delegation, on trying to push for a regional clinic for our area, because there's not enough venues, clinic areas in our district for our populations. We were given 100 doses for an order for 17 towns, essentially, which is ridiculous. So we've been pushing for that. The state, as they've created an oversight committee, it sounds like there may be more of a change in a shift in attitude in the administration. But as of last week, so they pulled those 100 doses from the communities last week, changed the whole how clinics, what you would need for a regional clinic. You would need to administer 750 doses daily. It would be open to everyone in the state. We'd need, we estimated about 40 people to staff that. And that would be every day of the week. So it completely was a game changer for what we were trying to propose for a regional clinic at Devon's. So there's more to come on that.
I noticed that we went from red to yellow, so that was kind of
Yes.
nice.
Woohoo!
We're
I'll take
in
it.
yellow. But I do, so to add on the vaccine issue, bottom line, there's just not enough vaccines. That's the true fact of the situation is the state is now getting 139,000 doses for the whole state each week, but it's still not enough for what the demand level is right now.
Well, that's only part of it. The rollout of the website and currently the website and it's awful. I mean,
It was.
it's an embarrassment. So they got to simplify it, and they can't be making us drive to Gillette to get these kind of things. You know, they got to recognize that, you know, outside of 495 exists in Massachusetts, and, you know, we're not part of New Hampshire yet, although I think we should be. But
Yeah, agreed.
I don't know how that process works.
Yeah, the governor was testified today, I believe, for the legislature about how the rollout has gone, and he's going back in 2 weeks, I believe.
Okay. If there's no other questions for the town manager, then I have to confess, I did not read the minutes. I don't know if other people have.
I did.
And if we have enough people who would want to take action on the minutes, I'm happy to entertain that. Okay, so just basically raise your hand if you're prepared to vote on the minutes.
I read them both. I'm prepared.
1, 2, 3. Okay, so that would be, we have 4 people, so that's enough to vote. So with that, I'll accept a motion on the recent minutes.
I don't have the date, so I can't make the motion.
Yeah, nor do I. I'm
Somebody's
on the wrong computer, so you got to bear with me.
It was February 11th, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So basically then I'm happy to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 11th.
So moved.
Oh,
Okay.
goodness. Who was that?
All right. Dave Passios moved and Chris Menard seconded.
Okay.
And then with that, roll call. Chris Menard,
Aye.
Heather Soroka,
Aye.
Peter Beardmore,
Aye.
Evan Waters,
Aye.
Dave Passios,
Aye.
Jay Simeone.
Where is he?
I don't know.
Muted.
But I'm gonna abstain, and Jay probably is gonna be an abstention. I'm
Okay.
guessing he didn't get into his mail today, or if he does come back in, then I can come back to him. But the minutes do pass, so we are set with those.
Oh, I sent those 2 days ago. We have a 48-hour window to send everything in.
Damn right.
Menard. So,
The Menard rule, yes.
Hey,
yeah. And
let's not
made
complain.
sure
These
they
are
were
from
just in for the time.
and these are from
slot.
February 11th. Your last clerk was doing minutes from like 3 months previous. So
Oh, but also they're
this
out
one
of
is-
order. They're out of order because when I went to look and to compare the video from January 28th,
forget about it.
it wasn't there. So I have to go back and do January 28th.
That's all right. You're still doing much better than your predecessors.
You don't
Might be a
even need a
permanent
volunteer
appointment.
anymore.
Yeah.
What? I was like, maybe the meeting didn't happen.
Actually, yeah, did it? Oh, yeah.
It did. I have
sure
a
it
lot of notes, but I wanted to make sure that they were accurate.
Yeah, yep. I appreciate that. Okay, I don't know if anybody wanted to have any discussion at all on policies tonight.
Oh, please no.
Okay, then I'll take that as consensus, and we'll just go with the, do we have a public comment, any public comment from anybody on the committee? Do we have any public comment from anybody in the public?
Do we have we're going to do committee reports or not?
Oh, I skipped right over that. I am so sorry.
She's
Sorry.
ready too.
Yeah.
Committee reports. Do we have any committee reports?
School
Go ahead,
committee.
Peter. I have none tonight.
Yeah.
School committee.
I got a school committee was a long meeting last night.
I turned it off.
Lots was discussed. The reopening plan is a hot topic again since the Commissioner of Education has announced that he wants K through 6, I believe, to be back 5 days a week by the beginning of April. Unfortunately, they are not going to be releasing any guidelines for that until a couple weeks from now, which will mean that they will have 3 weeks to figure out all the particulars of how they're going to do this. And so there isn't a lot of detail yet on this. But I can tell you, I'm very concerned that there isn't going to be sufficient time to plan this. There were some line item transfers last night, mostly relating to sub accounts, and in some cases to paralegal sub accounts, because paralegals were stepping in for teachers and subs. Paraprofessionals. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, I was like paralegal.
No. I'm thinking of my day job, not my night job. Paraprofessionals. And apologies. Paraprofessionals stepping in subbing, and then the paraprofessionals need to be backfilled. In any event, there were some line item transfers. There was a rather extensive discussion about the budget, which I referred to earlier today. Nothing substantial to report relative to changes that are being made, but I think that they will be enumerated in great detail when the superintendent comes in and reports. One thing that I do think this committee does need to be aware of, though, is the committee voted to submit to the Capital Planning Committee a change in their submission for FY22. So their intent, although it is not planned to be funded, is to withdraw the air conditioning request for the primary school and replace it with a request for the fire alarm system in the primary school. Apparently there are some parts of that system which are no longer in manufacture, and the system is going through some pretty severe fits and starts around false alarms, certain weather conditions, and that sort of thing. So the Capital Planning Committee will be hearing about this substitution and late request very soon. And that is the report.
Just to make a comment very quickly, I believe there was an earmark in one of the bond bills that was supposed to go towards that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Dave. There was a $25,000 earmark on that. It's a $120,000 system to replace. So but the earmark, my understanding, is a use it or lose it. So if we don't, which is another thing here, which is I believe if we don't fund this, the state funds are at some risk.
If it's a true earmark, that's not true. I'll look into it. Thank you.
That's the way it was. That was the way it was portrayed last night, but I don't know.
Heather, do you have any on the use it or lose it type attitude towards that?
No, but I can definitely look into that. We haven't received any contract paperwork from the state on that, and that usually designates the deadline for use. So
okay. I was told once in the recent past that certain earmarks are guaranteed money and not necessarily guaranteed that you have to use it for what it was originally earmarked for, but that's only certain earmarks. So thank you.
Okay. Any other committee reports? No other committee reports? Okay, then next week, March 4th, we will be hearing from Monty Tech and the DPW.
Terry, my intent, and I can probably circle up with you early in the week, is spend some time this weekend working on the draft for the warrant letter. So maybe we could put a placeholder on the agenda for that for next week as a kind of a first look.
Yes.
if you want as well to put an agenda topic for drafts warrant articles.
Or will we have some?
What's been submitted so far, then the deadline is March 15th. So it's not going to be a true reflection of all the articles, but it will be.
Are you getting any from outside the town?
Nope. There will be a planning board article, I have heard.
Really?
They haven't learned their lesson yet.
There was talk that there wasn't going to be, but I guess there is.
80 pages.
They just don't want anybody to
It's just a
forget about it.
table this time, I guess. So
There may be a parks article, but it will, I would say, not have a financial impact on the budget.
Okay. All right. Then with that, I'm happy to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Peter, motion to adjourn. Chris seconded. So I'll take roll call. Chris Menard,
Right.
Peter Beardmore,
Aye.
Evan Waters,
Aye.
Dave Passios.
Aye.
Oh, Jay Simeone, before I ask you about this, did you want to get a vote in on the minutes from February 11th?
I haven't looked at them, so I'll abstain.
Okay, thank you. And how do you feel about adjourning?
Aye.
Okay, Heather Soroka,
Aye.
aye for myself. Just before I do say goodnight, Jay, was there something else you wanted to say?
Well, what time are we starting next week?
Next week we'll start at 7. This week it was 6 o'clock just for the OPEB. Yeah, that was because we had OPEB and debt added on top of the budget presentation. So